Natalie Bencivenga.
And I'm Tony Norman. And this is In Other News, the podcast that is not afraid to go there.
Where?
Anywhere the story takes us. You concerned about speaking your mind?
Me? Yeah, right. You?
Ha! Let's go, Nat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to In Other News, episode 7. I'm Natalie Bencivenga with my wonderful and very matchy co-host, Tony Norman. How are you, Tony?
Feeling good. It's nice. It's a nice day out there, and and it's nice to be with you, Nat.
It's nice to be with you. And we're actually recording this on International Women's Day. So shout out to all the women and gender expansive people fighting for our rights, because we need to play a little catch up here, apparently. Man. And speaking of, we've got so much to talk about today. So are you ready, Tony?
As ready as I'm ever going to be, given this subject matter.
Well, we're going to kick things off with something actually really positive, I think. We're going to talk a little bit about Governor Josh Shapiro's new budget and the plans that he has laid out. This is his first sort of big official conversation with the public and media around what he's bringing to the table this year. And there were some really incredible highlights.
Right. I mean, every governor's budget is a declaration of that governor's values.
Yes.
And we voted for a progressive governor. And that's what we got.
Yeah.
Certainly the alternative would have been horrific.
Oh, we'll save that for later.
That,
Little teaser.
Yeah, there you go.
But let's drill down a little bit and talk about some of the topics in today's hot takes. Thinking about all of the many plights that are impacting the people of Pennsylvania. That was a lot of P's in that sentence. Let's kick things off with talking about how he wants to raise, Governor Shapiro, the minimum wage from $7.25, drum roll,
there you go,
to $15 an hour. And how are we feeling about that number?
We're feeling better about the 15.
Yeah.
But it is nowhere near what it needs to be.
15 would have worked like in 2010.
Exactly. I mean, you really have to be, realistically speaking, you have to be more between 22 and 25 just to keep even with inflation.
Well, Tony, would you believe it or not, and I think you'll believe it, that the Republicans are not on board with this idea around raising the minimum wage, and said that it is not necessary.
Right. And it seems amazing that a lot of these Republicans represent people in rural areas who would just kill to be able to have, a livable wage and be able to do the things that people in the cities and people who are making, $25 an hour and more take for granted.
Well, and what bothers me about that too is when I'm looking at a lot of the things that Shapiro wants to do, one of them is, raising the income threshold for a state property tax and rent rebate program for older adults from $35,000 to $45,000 a year. These are all initiatives that impact everyone, not just one party or another. So I find it fascinating that oftentimes the Republicans are sort of, cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Exactly. I mean, a situation like that helps raise all boats, you would think would be eagerly embraced by people in both parties. But there really is an ideological resistance to the idea that there are so many people who have not earned that. And so they don't want to see anyone get a benefit from the government that they don't deserve, unquote.
Quote, yes.
Right.
And I always find that interesting because we're the government. Like we fund the government.
We the people.
The people.
So
it's
read
like
it somewhere.
That's our money. That's what I'm always just amazed about. Like, give me back my money. Like, if not for this, then for what? And one of those programs that I find important, very important, that he is focusing on is that he's going to invest $16 million in SNAP benefits to mitigate the loss of food benefits for older adults and for people with disabilities. And I think that is something, once more, that we can all get behind.
Exactly.
And there's been a lot of conversation, around what's going on in our local government as it pertains to mental health supports, not just for the people, which Shapiro also supports increasing funding around those, but for our local and elected officials themselves. And we received an update recently on Fetterman and his health, and there were photos that his staff took of him working in the Walter Reed Medical Center, where he's currently receiving treatment for mental health care.
Right. Senator John Fetterman has been struggling with mental health issues following his stroke last year. And, it's very encouraging to see the support that he's received from his constituents and from across Pennsylvania and across the country. But, sometimes, and we also have another senator who is struggling with health issues, Senator Casey. We've been, sort of quietly talking about worst case scenarios. And what happens if one or both of these senators are incapacitated? How do we deal with filling those spots?
Yeah, and I didn't know this, and I'm guessing if I didn't, probably a lot of other people didn't either, because this isn't something I think that you would really figure out on your own unless you were looking for it. But Pennsylvania is one of the states that would give the governor no restrictions to appoint somebody to the Senate for the remainder of their term. There's no special election or anything required for that. So if for whatever reason, Senator Casey or Senator Fetterman could not fulfill their duties or needed to step away to take care of their health, it is Governor Josh Shapiro, that would appoint someone in their place. And thank goodness it would be Josh Shapiro, because as we know, Mastriano,
who ran for governor,
and lost.
Thank God.
Thank God. He is now pivoting his plans because, and I quote, "What do you do with a movement of 2.2 million people?" He recently said this to Politico. This is one of the very few mainstream, quote unquote, interviews that he's ever given. And he said, we're keeping it alive, meaning he wants to mobilize these 2.2 million people that voted for him as he looks to potentially eye a Senate run. What do you think of that?
He's looking at Bob Casey's Senate seat, and which is up in 24. And he thinks that he has a grassroots movement, even though he lost spectacularly in the gubernatorial race. But it doesn't seem to have penetrated his dome yet. So he's waiting for God to give him a sign.
And his wife, I heard.
And his wife.
His wife gets the final say after God. How fitting on International Women's Day that the woman is going to get the final say.
Well, that's the natural order of succession.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I'll tell my husband that. No, but all joking aside, what concerns me so much about Mastriano or any extremist on the right running is we're seeing how that terrifying rhetoric of truly wanting to erase entire groups of people is actually coming into play in a policy way in other states around the country. And for example, what's going on in Tennessee with basically trying to ban drag, and how that could implicate people that are just going to visit the state. And also, if it can be done there, it can be done anywhere. We cannot take our foot off the gas.
Right. I mean, criminalizing drag. I mean, not just banning it.
It would become a felony.
And how do you enforce something like that without becoming a police state, literally?
But that's what they want. I think that's where this is all headed, is they want a big brother, quote unquote, but in a very sinister, dark way.
Yeah, I suppose. But
I'm also very dramatic today. So,
but you may be right. I mean, because who would have thought? And it seems to be that all of these laws and all of these attempts to sort of like police gender and they always have like a long-term plan. Like with abortion, there's a long-term strategy that the right wing had, and they're willing and patient enough to devote decades to this particular strategy. And in this case, is trans people and eradicating them. I mean, using the language of some of the most hostile folks and theorists when it comes to this issue.
Absolutely. Because if you're looking at abortion and you're looking at the issues plaguing our gender expansive communities, there's a ton of overlap here because what this really comes down to is the policing of bodies
Yes.
and saying because you are a gender, you do not have the same bodily autonomy as another group of people. And that to me, if we're looking at what terrifies me, if you're going to start dehumanizing one group of people, it is just a slippery slope, as you and I both know, as how this will continue to impact all of us, no
Right.
matter our race, our gender, our socioeconomic class. They're going to come for all of us eventually. So we need to stay diligent. And, Tony, on this show, we love talking to people that aren't just discussing the issues, but actually doing things in our own communities to help eradicate or alleviate some of these problems. And all of these issues intersect. So stay tuned for the drill down because we're going to chat with someone who's working at the intersection of food insecurity and social justice on our college campuses.
You're listening to In Other News.
Thanks for joining us. All right, we are thrilled to drill down today with Susie Fishman. She is the founder of Meet My Needs, and that's with a KNEADS, and a purveyor of brain healthy spice blends. Susie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for coming,
I'm
Susie.
thrilled. Thanks. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yes. So today we want to talk a little bit about, one, your connection to Pittsburgh, your organization and how it began, and really some of these interacting social issues that we've been discussing, which really focuses on racial justice, social justice, and food insecurity. So just to kick things off, we know that you do have a Pittsburgh tie. So can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm a Pittsburgh girl, born and raised in Squirrel Hill, and I'm a proud graduate of the University of Pittsburgh School of Engineering.
All right.
I won't tell you which year.
That's fair. That's fair. But you don't live in Pittsburgh anymore.
I don't. Our family has moved to Palo Alto, California, here in Silicon Valley, in Stanford University's backyard. But once a Pittsburgh girl, always a Pittsburgh girl. So we still
You still
cheer
root for the Steelers? Really?
You know it, Steeler Nation.
Wow. Okay.
Steeler Nation extent.
You're a real Yinzer.
He says with love. No, but that's wonderful. And, we've been talking about so many things that are all of these moving parts that are intersecting and happening in our communities. And when I hear somebody that's a Pittsburgher, always a Pittsburgher, is this idea that we always like to roll up our sleeves and get involved with the things that really matter and impact our communities. So please share with everyone your connection to the world of food insecurity, because that's something we really want to get into today, and as it pertains to kids on campuses.
Yes,
college
thank you.
campuses. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, first of all, what is food insecurity? A lot of people don't even know what the definition of that is. What it means is that you do not have access to healthy, nutritious food on a reliable basis. It means that you are not necessarily hungry 100% of the time. It means that your money runs out by the end of the month. And the last week of the month, you just don't have money to buy food, and you're food insecure. You don't know where that next meal, that next nutritious meal is coming from. So I started Meet My Needs sort of during the pandemic as everyone got into baking, and I wanted to build community online around baking. And so everybody has their favorite bread, the bread that they grew up with. I started baking bread and teaching people how to bake bread. And in my research around bread, and I also spice all of my bakes. In my research related to spicing and baking, I came across an organization called Challah for Hunger. They have now rebranded themselves as Nazun, NAZUN.org. But they were addressing the issue of food insecurity on college campuses. And I was shocked to find out that actually 1 in 3 students, college students in the US, experiences food insecurity at some point during their college career, and a lot of them on a regular basis. So from there, I did more research, and I found another organization called Swipe Out Hunger, swipeouthunger.org. And they are leading the charge for addressing this issue.
Mm.
And I have to say, as a University of Pittsburgh engineering student and someone who has sort of an industrial engineering mindset, I immediately recognize this problem as a supply chain problem, as a communication and culture problem, as an awareness problem. So, and it's a solvable problem.
Mm.
And probably you're like me, so many of the problems in the world, homelessness, climate change, you feel overwhelmed by
Yes.
those problems. What can I do? But when I saw food insecurity on college campuses, immediately I said, that is a solvable problem. And I want to support that and address that.
Some of the numbers that we came across in researching this are really astounding. I think, what was it, 40% of people, students of color,
So it was actually
black people,
50.
50%.
It was actually 50%. So there was a 2018 survey of 6,000 students in about 11 regional institutions, found that almost 50% of Black and Latino students were food insecure, and 30% of white students were food insecure. That we were
Mhm.
both blown away by that.
Right, right. Because it seems that when you're in college, you're surrounded by pizza boxes and
Right.
all sorts of stuff, but that's not necessarily nutritious. And I wonder if that's also part of the calculus that a lot of students are eating junk, or is it just that they're not eating at all?
Mm-hmm.
It's both, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to your statistics, most of those are women, and a lot of them are women who have a child and are supporting a family. So, what do you think is the average age of a college student on college campuses? What would you say is the age?
I mean, I would assume 19, 20.
Sure. Tony, you want to take a guess?
I'm with you.
Yeah, we're over here
Yeah.
agreeing.
So the average age is 26. And so
Wow.
a lot of
Really?
these students, yes, a
My
lot of these
goodness.
students have, they've saved up money to go to college. Maybe they're the first person in their family to ever go to
Wow.
college. They've been working hard to get there. They may have a child already or a family to support. They have expenses. They have some debt
Yeah.
built up already. And now here they are trying to make a better life for themselves and their families, and they don't have enough money to pay for food.
Hmm.
And so it's actually shocking, but it's a solvable problem. And there are ingenious ways that these organizations have joined together to solve it, and they're already making a lot of progress.
Is this a problem that's recognized by the administrations of these schools? I mean, is this something that's talked about openly, at school associations, and do alumni know about this? Or is this invisible?
Great question, because just like you're talking about the statistics and the data behind this, at one point there wasn't data. We weren't counting how many students fell into this category. They were kind of hidden and no one knew about them. So I'm thrilled that you brought that to the forefront, because Swipe Out Hunger, Challah for Hunger, and organizations like this are joining in a coalition with administrations of universities now, and they're collecting the data. And if you collect the data, then you can start to solve problems. So they're also working with legislators in different states, and different organizations, private and public, to address the problem.
Yeah, because a lot of this, I always think of, poverty is really a policy choice. And we have a new governor, Governor Shapiro, and he has really been highlighting food insecurity, especially within elementary schools and high schools, as, having free school breakfasts and free school lunches, like a new permanent thing. So it's important that we do have legislature and government behind these initiatives. But when we don't particularly have that momentum, it's organizations like yours that are really coming in to highlight and bring attention and awareness. So can you speak a little bit to what you're up to these days, and how people can get involved and help end hunger on campuses?
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. So when I saw this problem, I always said, I have to help. I'm, in addition to being an engineer and a businesswoman, I have 3 children that we've put through college. And I can't imagine sending my kids to college without a meal program or a secure way to access food. And so, how can I not help another person's child get through a college and stay in school. And so what I decided to do was that I was going to sell spice blends online at meetmyneeds.com, and 100% of profits go to address food insecurity on college campuses. I donate directly to Nazoon and to Swipe Out Hunger, two organizations that are amazing and doing great work. I didn't want to get in their way by starting another nonprofit of my own. So I am really at their service to support them, and they're doing amazing work. So if you buy the Spice Blends, then 100% of the profits go to address food insecurity. I call it a win-win-win because you get great Spice Blends. We get to support food insecurity by donating to the organizations doing the hard work. And then also I make new friends.
Well, we appreciate you so much. And as we wrap up this segment, is there a promo code or something that people can check out specifically on your website if they want to order the spices?
Sure. So I have a special promo code for your listeners and audience. It's Pittsburgh. If you go to meetmyneeds.com, just type in Pittsburgh as the promo code, and you'll have a discount on your purchase. And I thank you so much for shedding the light on this issue. I want to give a special shout out to your former governor, Wolf, who has allocated $1 million to address this in the state of Pennsylvania. Governor Shapiro is doing even one better and is supporting $2 million. He added an additional $1 million to the budget to support college students. And as well, there's Representatives Jennifer O'Mara, Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, Senator Carolyn Comita. When you go vote, please support those candidates because they are addressing food insecurity for all of our students. Hopefully we're making progress, and we can, in the future, not have hungry students on our college campuses, keep those students in school, and they'll end up being productive members of our community, making our community stronger.
Absolutely. I love how tapped in you are to Pennsylvania politics, even though you're out on the West Coast now. That is once a Pittsburgh girl, always a Pittsburgh girl. Thank you so much, Susie, for joining us, and stay tuned for our final thoughts. You're listening to In Other News.
Thanks for tuning in.
That was so great chatting with Susie, and it really got me thinking about all of these different intersections. And something that that's kind of near and dear to me as we're heading into final thoughts is the topic of healthcare.
Absolutely. It's near and dear to me too, believe me.
Absolutely. I think it's near and dear to all of us at this point. And part of that is because of the lack of healthcare in our communities. And something I've been really thinking about was I just saw this article in Pittsburgh Magazine recently, and it says how a University of Pittsburgh junior is helping families pay their medical bills. The Pakistani immigrant founded the nonprofit Spread the Love Projects. That so far, it has raised $17,000. He worked as an EMT, a volunteer. His name is Imad Khan. And he realized people were telling him, please don't take me to the hospital. I can't afford the ambulance ride, which makes me feel sick to my stomach. And so being, an awesome human that he is, he decided to start this fund. And on the surface, I think that's a beautiful thing.
It's very noble on the surface. I mean, because, this young man, shows that he has a big heart and that he is looking at a big issue in American society. The failure of our, medical establishment to be able to address the needs of ordinary people without it costing an arm and a leg. And of course, it's complicated by the fact that in the university context, especially like at Pitt, which is the chief employer in Pittsburgh and the chief landlord in Oakland, and has incredible endowment. Does it really need charity efforts to do this? And I think not.
Yeah, and what makes me kind of angry about this whole thing is Spread the Love has partnered with UPMC Children's Hospital Foundation, and they're allocating a portion of the proceeds towards providing resources for children and their families in that system. Once again, on the surface, I love what he's doing. This is not a criticism at all of his efforts. I think this is clearly an indication of where we are as a society, that individuals are starting to create these basically insurance funds for other people so that they have access to this money. But what frustrates me is something as big as UPMC doesn't need to be taking a portion of these funds. And I find it a little disturbing that we're still in 2023 having a conversation that people can't afford to go buy ambulance to the hospital, have their medical needs met. That to me is the larger issue. But as always, we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. So there are so many great ways to activate in your communities, and we'll have all of them listed in the show notes here. So you can check those out at nextpittsburgh.com. Check out Tony's column while you're over there as well. And as always, everyone, make sure you're taking care of yourselves and each other. And Tony and I will be back next week with more matching outfits.
All right. And spreading the love as usual.
That's right. In Other News is a presentation of Next Pittsburgh and is proudly produced by us, along with our amazing team, Emma Honcharski and Margie Ruttenberg. Our editor is Sorgatron Media, and original music by Jack Swing.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, please like and share this episode and rate and review us wherever you're listening. It really helps us grow. And if you're listening on the Next Pittsburgh website, take a minute to take a look around to learn more about all the cool stuff happening in our hometown.